We're going back in time, like over 100 years, to explore the Titanic.
A legendary ship.
Yeah, so get ready to uncover some cool stuff about this famous ship stuff you probably won't find in your textbooks.
You got it.
Okay, so picture this. Early 1900s, everyone's traveling by ship, right? The White Star Line, which was the company that owned the Titanic, wanted to build the biggest, fanciest ship ever.
Yeah, they wanted to crush the competition.
They really did. They dreamed of a ship so big it could hold 17 statues of Liberty.
And guess what?
They did it.
They did it. The Titanic was as long as 3 football fields.
Wow.
And as tall as a 17-story building.
Whoa, that's taller than my school. How did they even build something that huge back then?
Well, it took over 3,000 workers, 3 long years.
Wow.
And about $7.5 million.
That's a lot.
Which today would be like winning the lottery.
Wow. So they spent all that money to make it super fancy, right? What made the Titanic so special?
Oh, yeah, especially for the first-class passengers. Yeah. Imagine this. You walk into this dazzling grand staircase made of oak.
Oh.
And it's topped with this beautiful glass dome that lets in tons of light.
Wow.
They even had a swimming pool on board.
Really?
Which was like super rare for 1912.
A swimming pool on a ship. That's so cool.
Yeah, and that's not all.
There's more.
First class also had a gym with electric exercise machines.
What?
Can you believe that? And a squash court and even Turkish baths.
Wow, they had everything. Did people in the other classes get to enjoy any of that?
Well, second class wasn't quite as fancy as first class.
Okay.
But it was still really nice, like staying in a comfortable hotel today.
Yeah.
And even third class was way better than most ships at the time.
Okay, so let's talk about the Titanic's first voyage.
All right.
Where was this massive ship going?
Well, the Titanic set sail from Southampton, England on April 10th, 1912. It was a huge deal.
I bet.
Like a giant celebration.
So cool.
And they even made stops in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown, Ireland to pick up more passengers.
I bet there were all sorts of people on board.
You're right. There were wealthy people like John Jacob Astor, the first immigrants hoping to start new lives in America.
Wow.
And even families on vacation. It was like this little floating world.
That's amazing. It's like everyone was coming together for a big adventure.
Yeah.
So what was it like once they were actually on the ship? Did they just hang out by the pool all day?
Well, it kind of depended on what class you were in.
Right.
First-class passengers, they could have breakfast in bed, take a relaxing stroll on the deck, and enjoy these fancy dinners that had, 11 courses.
11 courses.
Wow.
I can barely decide between pizza and tacos.
Yeah.
What did they eat?
Now, that's a good question.
Yeah. Okay.
But for now, let's just say they had a lot of choices.
Okay, so first class had it pretty sweet. What about the other passengers?
Well, third-class passengers had their own dining area, but the food was much simpler.
Okay.
They did have their own deck, though, for fresh air and games.
That's good.
And they even had music and dancing for fun.
So even though their lives were different on the ship, it sounds like everyone was having a good time before,
Yeah, before that fateful night.
Right.
But we'll save that part of the story for later on.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine being on that ship knowing what happened next.
Yeah, it's true. The night of April 14th, 1912 started like any other, but it quickly turned into one of the most tragic events in history.
So what exactly happened? Everyone always talks about the iceberg, but what does that even mean?
Well, imagine you're on a giant ship sailing through the ocean at night. It's dark, and all you can see are the stars and the water around you. Suddenly, a lookout spots something huge and white looming in the distance.
An iceberg. Like the kind penguins hang out on.
Kind of, but these icebergs are massive chunks of ice that have broken off from glaciers.
Oh, wow.
They float in the ocean, and they can be super dangerous for ships.
So what happened when they saw the iceberg? Couldn't they just steer around it?
They tried. The crew tried to turn the ship away.
Okay.
But the Titanic was going pretty fast, and it was too late. The ship scraped along the side of the iceberg.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it created this big gash in the hull, kind of like a giant scratch.
Ouch. So that's how the water got in.
Exactly. You see, the Titanic was built with these special walls inside called watertight compartments,
Oh.
like giant slices of bread. They were designed to keep the water from spreading if there was a hole.
That sounds pretty smart. So it worked, right?
Well, unfortunately, no. The impact was so severe that several compartments were ripped open.
Oh, no.
And water started pouring in.
So what happened to everyone on the ship?
Well, they realized that the ship was in trouble, and they started sending out distress signals using a wireless telegraph.
Oh, wow.
They were basically sending out calls for help, like a text message saying, SOS, we need help.
And it was 1912.
Wow.
Was there even anyone out there to hear them?
Luckily, another ship called the Carpathia picked up their signal.
Okay, good.
But there's a catch. The Carpathia was over 50 miles away.
Wow. That's really far. So they had to wait a long time for help to arrive.
Yeah, and it gets worse. There weren't enough lifeboats for everyone on the Titanic.
Why not? Didn't they know that was important?
Well, back then, people thought the Titanic was so safe that they didn't think they would need that many lifeboats. They believed the ship could stay afloat, even with some damage.
Well, that wasn't a very good plan. What happened to the people who couldn't get on a lifeboat?
It was a terrifying situation. As the ship started to sink, people were scrambling for a way to survive.
Oh, no.
Some people jumped into the freezing water, while others clung to pieces of the ship hoping for a miracle. That's so sad. So how did anyone survive this disaster?
The people who managed to get onto the lifeboats,
Yeah.
they face hours of darkness and freezing temperatures while waiting for the Carpathia to arrive. Imagine being stuck in a tiny boat in the middle of the ocean, not knowing if you would ever be rescued.
That must have been the scariest thing ever. Did everyone on the lifeboats make it?
Sadly, no. Some of the lifeboats were only partially full, and they couldn't go back to pick up more people because they were afraid of being swamped by those struggling in the water.
Oh, wow. So what happened when the Carpathia finally arrived?
The crew of the Carpathia worked tirelessly to pull survivors from the lifeboats.
Wow.
They provided medical care and blankets to those who were cold and scared. It was a truly heroic effort.
It's amazing that one ship saved so many lives. But I can't help but think about all the people who didn't make it.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking story, and over 1,500 people lost their lives in the disaster. But it's important to remember that even in the face of tragedy, there were incredible acts of courage and selflessness.
Like what? Well, many men gave up their spots on the lifeboat so that women and children could escape.
Wow.
And the ship's band continued to play music to keep people calm as the ship sank.
Wow, those are some seriously brave people. It's hard to imagine staying calm in a situation like that.
That's why the Titanic continues to fascinate people all over the world. It's a story of human strength and resilience, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy.
So what happened to the Titanic after it sank? Did it just disappear into the ocean?
That's what people thought for a long time. It wasn't until 1985, over 70 years later, that a team of explorers finally found the wreckage of the Titanic lying on the ocean floor.
Wait, they actually found it. After all that time.
Yep. They used special underwater robots and cameras to explore the wreck, which was over 2 miles below the surface.
2 miles? That's like stacking up my school building 8 times. It must have been an incredible sight.
It was. And the discovery of the wreck helped us learn even more about what happened that night. Titanic was like this marvel of engineering back then. Remember, it was as tall as a 17-story building.
Yeah.
People thought it was unsinkable. And then it sank on its first voyage.
That's crazy. It's like if your new phone just stopped working right out of the box.
Exactly. It made people question technology and progress. But the Titanic story is about more than just the ship itself. It's about the people on board, their dreams, their hopes, their struggles.
Yeah, we learned there were all kinds of people on the Titanic. Millionaires, immigrants, everyone. Did they all have the same experience, though?
Not at all. The ship was divided into 3 classes: first class, second class, and third class. Third class was sometimes called steerage.
So like different levels in a video game.
Yeah. Each class had its own areas and perks.
So first class was like the VIP section.
Pretty much. They had the best cabins, amazing food, and access to all the fun stuff.
Like what?
Like the swimming pool, the gym, and even a Turkish bath. It was like a super fancy resort.
That sounds awesome. What about second class? Any cool perks there?
Second class was still pretty nice, like staying at a decent hotel. They had their own dining room, a library. But their cabins were smaller than first class.
Okay, and what about third class? What was it like for them?
Third class, or steerage, was the most basic level.
Yeah.
They had to share cabins and didn't have all the fancy stuff.
Yeah.
Remember, a lot of them were immigrants traveling to America for a better life.
Right.
So even though it wasn't luxurious, the Titanic was a symbol of hope for them.
So even though they had different experiences, they were all on this journey together, and then the tragedy happened.
That night changed everything. The sinking wasn't just a disaster. It became this global event that shocked the world.
Yeah, I bet. It's like when a famous celebrity dies, everyone's talking about it.
Exactly. People couldn't believe the unsinkable ship had sunk. They were heartbroken about all the lives lost.
But even though it was so sad, there were these incredible acts of courage and kindness.
There really were.
We talked about the band playing music to keep people calm, and the men who gave up their lifeboat seats for women and children.
Right, and those acts of bravery are a big part of why the Titanic story still inspires people. It reminds us that even in danger, people can be selfless and courageous.
It makes you think about what you would do in that situation. Would you be brave enough to help others?
That's a question we should all ask ourselves. The Titanic reminds us that we all have the potential for greatness, even in the darkest times.
The Titanic sank over 100 years ago, but people are still fascinated by it. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a mystery. Why did this unsinkable ship sink? Was it bad luck? Human error?
Yeah.
There are still so many theories, and that keeps people curious.
It's like a puzzle people are still trying to solve. And the stories of the passengers and crew keep people interested too.
Absolutely. Their stories remind us that history is about real people who lived, loved, and lost.
And even though it was a tragedy, the sinking led to some important changes, right?
It did. After the disaster, people realized that ships needed enough lifeboats for everyone.
Right.
And they made rules about 24-hour radio watch so ships could call for help.
So it wasn't just about the sinking, it was about learning from mistakes and making things safer.
That's a great point. And that's what makes history so important. It helps us understand the past so we can make better decisions for the future.
I hope you all learned something new and maybe even thought about some bigger questions from this incredible story.
And remember, history is full of amazing stories. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions. You never know what mysteries you might uncover.